Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Today's episode is the Pendulum Wars. Something is being broadcast into human consciousness. Before we begin, I want to invite you to an amazing 4-day immersive meditative experience that I'm hosting in Maui, Hawaii. There are still some tickets available. I would love to see you there. In this 4-day experience, you will meet your higher self, merge with your future self, undergo the most profound healing imaginable, awakening your bliss body, opening to love, manifesting large sums of money, and so much more. I hope to see you there. I'm hosting this at the Maui Westin. Tickets are still available. You can get them at www.brianscottlive.com/Hawaii-2026. On November 5th, 2018, sensors monitoring the Earth's electromagnetic field detected something that had never been observed in the history of the monitoring program. The Schumann Resonance, the standing electromagnetic frequency generated by the cavity between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere, a frequency that has hovered around 7.83 hertz for as long as reliable measurements have existed, spiked. Not a small fluctuation, a spike, up to 36 hertz, then 150 hertz. Then, for a period that researchers could not explain, the coherent signal appeared to bifurcate, as if the field were broadcasting two different frequencies simultaneously. The geophysics community offered the standard explanations: solar activity, electromagnetic interference, equipment anomaly, ionosphere disturbance from a geomagnetic storm. But there was a problem with the standard explanation. They didn't match the data. The spike on November 5th was the most visible event, but it was far from the only one. A researcher named Greg Braden, who has spent 30 years correlating Schumann Resonance data with global events and human physiological states, documented a pattern of escalating anomalies across 2017, 2018, and 2019, spikes and frequency shifts that had no conventional meteorological or solar explanation. The Russian Space Observing System, which maintains the most comprehensive long-term Schumann monitoring network in the world, published data confirming the anomalies. The readings were real. The cause was officially unknown. At roughly the same time, and this is where the story gets strange in a different way, something else was happening. People were dreaming the same thing. Before we can talk about what might be broadcasting into human consciousness, we need to establish that something is. As data, the Schumann resonance was first predicted mathematically by physicist Winfried Otto Schumann in 1952. The principle is straightforward. The space between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere acts as a resonant cavity, a waveguide, and electromagnetic waves generated primarily by lightning activity bounce between these boundaries, producing standing waves at predictable frequencies. The fundamental frequency is approximately 7.83 hertz, with harmonics at 14.3, 20.8, 27.3, and 33.8 hertz. This is established, uncontroversial physics. Here is where it becomes something else entirely. The Schumann resonance frequencies fall almost perfectly within the range of human brainwave activity. This is not a coincidence that science has ignored. It is, in fact, one of the most studied correlations in the field of biophysics. Dr. Andrija Puharich, who was mentioned in The Law of One Material, the biophysicist and inventor who worked extensively with human biological response to electromagnetic fields in the 1970s and 80s, was among the first Western researchers to document the physiological entrainment effect, the way human brainwave activity naturally synchronizes to external electromagnetic frequencies within the biological range. His research suggested that the Schumann fundamental frequency specifically resonated with a relaxed, meditative alpha state, the state associated with reduced stress, enhanced intuition, and what researchers now call open monitoring awareness. In simpler language, the Earth's electromagnetic heartbeat is tuned by physics to the frequency of human receptivity. The implications of this single fact are enormous. If the Earth is electromagnetically speaking a 7.83 Hz broadcast, and if the human nervous system is designed to receive and synchronize with 7.83 Hz, then we are not separate from the planet's electromagnetic field. We are continuously biologically receiving a transmission from it. We are antennas. We are receivers. We have always been. The question that the anomalous spikes of 2017 through 2019 and the continuing pattern of escalating Schumann disruptions since then forces us to ask is not whether we're receiving a signal. The question is, when the signal changes, what changes in us? In 2016, a researcher named Cassandra Vietin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, a legitimate scientific research organization founded in 1973 by Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell, began systematically documenting what she and her colleagues called anomalous shared experience, instances in which geographically separated individuals with no apparent communication between them reported identical or near-identical dreams, visions, and intuitive experiences within tight temporal windows. The preliminary data was unusual enough that the Institute expanded the study. By 2019, they had documented hundreds of cases. The patterns were consistent. The phenomenon was not explainable by known mechanisms of information transfer. Social media added an entirely new dimension to this data. Platforms designed to aggregate content by topic began surfacing organically threads and posts in which strangers from different countries and continents compared notes on dreams they had on the same night. The dreams weren't thematically vague, the kind of common archetypes that Jungian analysts would point to as evidence of a collective unconscious. They were specific imagery, specific locations, specific figures, specific events that had not yet occurred in waking reality. In 2020, as the world locked down and millions of people, waking rhythms were simultaneously disrupted, the volume of reported sharing dreaming experiences increased so dramatically that multiple mainstream outlets covered the phenomenon, typically framing it as a psychological response to collective trauma. But the researchers who had been tracking the data before 2020 noticed something that didn't fit the collective trauma explanation. The shared dreams had begun intensifying not in 2020 when the shared trauma occurred, but in 2017, 3 years earlier, before the trauma, before any event that could serve as a cultural synchronizer. Something else was driving the synchronization, and whatever it was not originating in human psychology. It was coming from outside. The concept of the morphogenetic field was introduced by developmental biologist Rupert Sheldrake in 1981. It was and remains one of the most contested and most interesting ideas in modern biology. Sheldrake proposed that biological organisms are not shaped solely by genetic code, but by an invisible organizing field, a morphic field that carries the pattern of the organism's development and that accumulates the memory of that pattern across generations. In his model, when enough members of a species learn a behavior, the behavior becomes easier for all subsequent members of the species to learn, not through genetic inheritance, but through what he called morphic resonance, the influence of the accumulated field on new organisms. He ran experiments. One of the most famous involved rats learning to navigate a new maze. After a sufficient number of rats had learned the maze, subsequent rats from entirely different populations with no genetic relationship to the original learners learned the same maze measurably faster. The pattern had entered the field was transmitting. Sheldrake's work was aggressively attacked by mainstream biology. His most famous book was famously called The Best Candidate for Burning by a Nature editor, a remark that says more about the threat the idea posed to existing paradigms than about its scientific merit. Experiments, however, have been replicated multiple times by independent researchers in controlled conditions. The field is real. The field transmits. The field accumulates. And if the field of a species accumulates the patterns of what that species experiences, believes, fears, and desires, then 7 billion human beings, all simultaneously exposed to similar information streams, similar emotional triggers, similar constructed narratives, are loading the same pattern into the field, are broadcasting the same frequency, which means something is listening, something's receiving. That something is you. In 2014, a Russian physicist and metaphysician named Vadim Zeland published the first volume of a work he titled Reality Transurfing. If you want to hear this book, I read many of the chapters in my playlist entitled Understanding Transurfing. Zeland was not a mystic. He was not a self-help author. He had worked as a quantum physicist at a classified research institute during the Soviet era, the kind of institution that in that context worked on problems that could not be publicly acknowledged. After the fall of the Soviet Union, he spent years in isolation writing. What he produced was a model of reality that drew on quantum mechanics, systems theory, and what he called the space of variations, a concept with striking parallels to the probability field in the looking glass accounts, to Bohm's implicate order, and to the morphogenetic field in Sheldrake's biology. But the element of Zeland's model that became most influential and most uncomfortable was his concept of the pendulum. A pendulum, in Zeland's model, is a thought energy structure that arises when a sufficient number of people begin thinking and feeling in the same direction. It's not created intentionally. It's an emergent phenomenon, the way a weather system emerges from the collective behavior of atmospheric particles, or the way a market forms from the aggregate behavior of individual buyers and sellers. It has no consciousness in the beginning in the way you have consciousness. It has no goals in the way you have goals, but it has something that functions like hunger. And what it feeds on is human attention and emotional energy directed toward it. The pendulum sustains itself by broadcasting, by generating in the human beings within its influence field the emotional states that produce the kind of attention it needs to survive: urgency, fear, anger, the specific flavor of desire that never quite resolves into satisfaction. Sound familiar? Every major pendulum operates on the same basic principle. Generate a deficit broadcast, the feeling of that deficit. The feeling of being unsafe, of being behind, of being incomplete, of being on the wrong side, of not having enough. Into the field. Wait for the attention response and feed. The pendulum doesn't care which side of any conflict you're on. It doesn't care whether your fear is of the left or the right, the vaccinated or the unvaccinated, the rich or the poor. It doesn't care whether you're anxious or angry. Both frequencies feed the same structure. What the pendulum cannot survive is your indifference, your stillness, your refusal to oscillate with it. The mechanism by which a pendulum captures a human being's attention and energy is so common, so pervasive, and so normalized that most people never notice it happening. Zeland describes 3 primary capture mechanisms. All 3 should be instantly recognizable. The first is identification. A pendulum binds you to it by getting you to identify with it, to make membership in its structure part of your sense of self. Once you identify as a member of a political party, a religious group, a sports franchise, a brand community, a movement, a tribe, any tribe, the pendulum gains access to your emotional energy through the back door of identity protection. You defend the pendulum, not because you consciously chose to, but because defending it has become indistinguishable from defending yourself. The second is induced importance. A pendulum elevates itself in your hierarchy of concern, makes itself feel urgent, critical, existentially significant, so that it consumes not just your occasional attention, but your baseline awareness. You are always at some level thinking about it, always carrying it, always running its operating code in the background of your mind, even when you believe you've put it down. The third is dependency. A pendulum makes you need it, not in the way you need food or water, in the way you need resolution. The story never quite finishes. The conflict never quite resolves. The problem is always almost solved but never fully solved. The dependency is maintained not by giving you what you want, but by keeping the promise of it perpetually one step ahead of you. The most disturbing aspect of pendulum dynamics is not the capture, it is the consent. Pendulums do not force your attention, they cannot. They can only broadcast a frequency and wait for you to tune to it. And for most of human history, in the absence of any framework for understanding what was happening, tuning to the broadcast felt like engagement with reality, felt like caring, like being a conscious, informed, morally serious person. The broadcast was so pervasive that the broadcast was the background. There was no silence to compare it to. There was no alternative frequency to tune to. At least, that was true until very recently. The Global Consciousness Project has been running since 1998. It was created by Roger Nelson, a researcher at Princeton's Pear Laboratory, after the lab's decades of work on human intention effects on physical systems suggested that the effect might operate at a global scale. The GCP maintains a network of hardware random event generators, electronic devices that produce truly random outputs at over 60 locations around the world. The outputs of these devices are continuously monitored. In a purely random universe, the aggregate output of 60 independent random generators should show no correlation. Each one should oscillate independently, producing a flat statistical baseline. The GCP data shows something different. At moments of large-scale global human attention, events that simultaneously focus the consciousness of millions of people in a single emotional direction, the random event generators become non-random. They correlate. Their outputs converge toward coherence. The statistical improbability of these convergence events, calculated across over 400 documented incidents, is approximately 1 in a trillion. 1 in a trillion. Let that number sit for a moment. In the scientific context, 1 in a trillion is not a statistical curiosity. 1 in a trillion is a message. The message is this: human consciousness, when focused collectively, changes the measurable behavior of physical systems at a distance. This is the published conclusion of a decades-long empirical research program based at one of the most respected universities in the world. Now ask a different question. If collective human consciousness, when focused, creates measurable coherence effects in the physical world, what is the effect of collective human consciousness when it is systematically focused by an external broadcast? What is the effect of billions of people simultaneously tuned to the same frequency of fear, urgency, incompleteness, and conflict? The 2018 Schumann spike that opened this episode was classified as an anomaly, but anomalies in science are data points that the existing model cannot accommodate. They are not evidence that the model is complete, they are evidence that the model needs to grow. Greg Braden's analysis of the escalating Schumann anomalies identified a pattern that the conventional electromagnetic models did not predict. The spikes correlate with periods of unusually high global collective emotional intensity, not with solar activity or geomagnetic storms, with human events characterized by widespread, simultaneously emotionally charged collective focus. If the morphogenetic field is real, if collective human consciousness generates an electromagnetic component that interacts with the Earth's resonant cavity, then the Schumann anomalies are not inexplicable at all. They are the field responding. This reframes everything. The Schumann resonance is not just a background frequency that happens to match human brainwave activity. It is a dynamic, responsive system. When enough human beings are broadcasting a coherent emotional signal, whether that coherence is produced by genuine collective experience or by the pendulum-mediated broadcast of manufactured urgency, the Earth's electromagnetic field responds. And when the Earth's field responds, it broadcasts back. The loop is closed. The feedback is active. The pendulum is not just capturing human attention and feeding on it. The pendulum, through its broadcast into the collective field, may be shaping the planetary electromagnetic environment in ways that make its frequency easier to receive and harder to escape. It may be modifying the antenna. Now, before the alarm sets in, because the alarm is precisely what the pendulum wants you to feel right now, let's talk about what else the data is saying. Because the data isn't only saying that pendulums are powerful, the data is also saying that you are more powerful than the pendulum, by an order of magnitude that should change every assumption you have ever made about yourself. In 1991, a cardiologist named Doc Childrey founded an organization called the Institute of HeartMath in Boulder Creek, California. The organization's stated mission was to understand the electromagnetic nature of the heart and its relationship to human cognition, emotion, and behavior. What they found, and they have been publishing in peer-reviewed journals for 30 years, rewrote everything that mainstream cardiology thought it knew about what the heart actually does. The human heart generates an electromagnetic field that extends several feet outside the body. This field is measurable with sensitive magnetometers. It is a documented electromagnetic phenomenon that cardiologists can measure with instruments that also measure the Earth's magnetic field. The heart's field is the most powerful electromagnetic field produced by any organ in the human body. It is approximately 5,000 times stronger in electrical terms than the brain's field. In magnetic terms, the difference is even more pronounced. The HeartMath researchers documented 2 distinct states in which the heart's electromagnetic field operates in measurably different modes. In a state of incoherence, produced by stress, anxiety, frustration, or any of the emotional signatures the pendulum broadcast generates, The heart's rhythm is irregular. The field is chaotic, and its interaction with the brain produces what the researchers call desynchronization. The cognitive faculties of the brain become less integrated, intuition decreases, and the individual becomes functionally more reactive and less creative. In a state of coherence produced by genuine positive emotion, particularly what they describe as heart-based states such as appreciation, compassion, and love, the heart rhythm becomes smooth and ordered, the field becomes coherent, and the brain's activity synchronizes with the heart's rhythm in a way that enhances cognitive integration, intuitive accuracy, and what researchers describe as access to information beyond ordinary sensory channels. Here's the strategic implication of this data. The pendulum broadcast generates incoherence. That is its operational mechanism. An incoherent human nervous system is a receptive one, reactive rather than creative, fear responsive rather than vision responsive, a passive receiver rather than an active broadcaster. A coherent human nervous system inverts this entirely. In a state of heart-brain coherence, the individual is no longer primarily receiving the ambient broadcast, they are generating one. They become the transmitter. One of the most striking series of experiments in the HeartMath database involves what the researchers call energetic communication between individuals, the measurable influence of one person's physiological state on another person's physiology, at distances that rule out conventional sensory transmission. In documented studies, when one subject achieved and sustained a state of heart coherence, the second subject, seated several feet away with no physical contact and no shared sensory information, showed measurable changes in their own physiological data. Heart rate variability shifts, brainwave synchronization with the first subject's rhythms, changes in skin conductance that mirrored the emotional state of the coherent individual. The coherent person was broadcasting. The second person was receiving, without knowing it, without trying, simply by proximity to the field of a coherent human heart. Now scale that. One coherent person can measurably shift the physiological state of people in proximity. What does a group of coherent people do to the broader field? HeartMath ran a study on this specifically in what they called the Global Coherence Initiative. Synchronized groups of people in heart coherent states were shown to produce effects detectable by the GCP network, measurable coherence events in the global random event generator data. The coherent people were changing the global field, not through force or through magnitude of numbers, but through the quality of the signal they were generating. One coherent heart out-broadcasts an entire news cycle, electromagnetically. Zeland's model of reality, the one that produced the pendulum concept, also produced a concept he called outer intention, which is in many ways more important and more helpful than anything in the pendulum analysis. Now, I've argued that you can take the words outer intention and just add the word God. But in Zeland's framework, human beings operate on two levels of intention simultaneously. Inner intention is the familiar one, the desire, effort, and willful action directed toward a goal. This is the intention most personal development teaches. Work harder, want it more, push through resistance. Outer intention is something different. It is not the will that drives toward an outcome. It is the alignment that allows an outcome to arise. It is the capacity to tune your inner state so precisely to the frequency of a desired reality that the field reorganizes around you, not because you pushed it, but because you became resonant with it. Outer intention requires a more precise form of attention than inner attention does. Inner attention is a hammer. Outer attention is a tuning fork. One works by impact, the other by vibration. The pendulum wants you locked in inner intention, efforting toward an outcome that controls the framing of, working harder within a game it designed, spending your energy on goals that perpetuate your dependency on the structures that generated those goals in the first place. Outer intention exits the game. Outer intention says, the reality I want exists. It exists as a frequency. My only task is to become resonant with that frequency. My inner state is the dial. My coherence is the tuning mechanism. And the field, the same field that broadcasts the pendulum signal, will respond to a coherent transmission with greater fidelity than it responds to any amount of forced inner intention. It is a description of how electromagnetic fields work. Coherence dominates. The pendulum war is real, but it is not being fought where most people think it is. It's not being fought in parliaments or boardrooms or on social media platforms, though those are all theaters of it. It is not being fought between political parties or ideological movements, though those are all pendulums with skin in the game. The pendulum war is being fought inside you, inside the individual human nervous system, in the space between an external event and your internal response to it. In the second between stimulus and the reaction, the space that Viktor Frankl identified from inside a Nazi concentration camp as the space of human freedom, the space that no pendulum can enter if you're aware of it. That second to half second is the battlefield, and you have total sovereignty over it. Here is the war, precisely described. The pendulum broadcasts a signal of incompleteness into the field. That signal generates in human beings who receive it without filtering an emotional state characterized by urgency, fear, and reactive seeking. That emotional state produces incoherence in the heart's electromagnetic field. That incoherence reduces the quality of the individual's broadcast into the morphogenetic field. The degraded broadcast contributes to a collective field environment that is more hospitable to pendulum activity and less hospitable to individual sovereignty. The loop feeds itself. But here is the other side of the loop. When a human being achieves heart coherence through genuine positive emotion, through conscious attention to inner state, through the deliberate cultivation of the feeling states associated with the reality they chose to occupy, the quality of their broadcast into the morphogenetic field increases dramatically. The coherent broadcast disrupts pendulum influence in the immediate environment. Other people in proximity begin to synchronize as the HeartMath data shows. The local field shifts. The quality of what arises from the space of variations around that person begins to reflect the coherent signal. And because the field is non-local, because, as the GCP data confirms, the coherence effects of synchronized human consciousness are not bounded by geography, the coherent individual contributes to a global field environment that is less hospitable to pendulum capture and more hospitable to human freedom. One person in genuine coherence changes the game for everyone in proximity, without their knowledge or their effort, simply by being. The anomalous Schumann spikes, the global synchronized dreaming, the morphogenetic field transmission, the GCP coherence events, the HeartMath electromagnetic evidence, the pendulum dynamics that Zeland derived from quantum physics. These are not separate phenomena. They are different instruments measuring the same thing. They are telling the story of a species in transition, a species whose collective consciousness has reached a threshold of coherence potential that is unprecedented in the monitoring record, and whose primary obstacle to crossing that threshold is not lack of capacity, not lack of intelligence, or lack of desire for something different. The primary obstacle is the broadcast. The pendulum's last and greatest power is this: it has convinced most people, perhaps you, that their inner state is a response to external conditions rather than a generator of them. It's convinced most people that coherence is a luxury, something you access after the world has settled down, after the crisis has passed, after the circumstances have improved enough to justify feeling good. This is the pendulum's masterwork, and it is a lie. Coherence is not the reward for winning the war. Coherence is the weapon. Your inner state is not the effect of your reality, it is the cause. And the moment you embody that, not believe it, not hope for it, or intellectually accept it, but embody that, the pendulum loses you forever. Now do this activation with me. Tune your transmitter. Take a breath. Just the breath that is already arriving. Let it land. There's a broadcast happening right now. There's always been a broadcast. You've been receiving it your entire life without knowing it was broadcast. You thought it was reality. You thought the urgency was real. You thought the incompleteness was real. The deficit was real. Some of it was. Some signals were genuine. Your own needs, your own desires, your own authentic response to your own authentic life. But woven into all of it, like static inside music, was the pendulum's transmission. The frequency of not enough, of not yet, of almost, always, almost, but never here. Notice right now, without judgment or effort, whether you can feel that frequency operating. It feels like a low-grade urgency with no specific object. It's like a restlessness that has forgotten what it's restless about. It feels like a background hum of not quite right that colors everything slightly like a tint on glass. You may not have been aware of it this whole time. You don't have to push it away. Fighting feeds it. Just notice it. Name it. That is the broadcast. That is not me. Now, beneath the broadcast, beneath the static and the urgency and the manufactured incompleteness, there's your signal. It's been there the entire time. It's never not been there. The broadcast did not destroy it. The broadcast only made it harder to hear. Your signal is quieter than the pendulum's. It always is. The pendulum broadcasts loudly because loudness is all it has. Your signal is quiet because it doesn't need your fear to survive. It doesn't need your urgency to sustain itself. It sustains itself on something else entirely. Find something real. A single thing in your life that when you think about it produces a genuine warmth. A person, place, a memory that lands in the body as something true. Doesn't need to be large. A cup of coffee on a specific morning. The weight of a hand you love. Find it. The moment a song started and everything disappeared. Just find it within you. Feel it. Feel it as a physical event in the chest. Not as a thought about the thing, as a felt sense of it. The warmth, if there is a warmth. The opening, if there's an opening. That's the coherence beginning. That's your heart's electromagnetic field organizing itself around a true signal. That's your transmitter coming online. Find it in your heart. Focus on your heart. Allow your consciousness to build there, to breathe there. Stay there and let it build. Now bring up an expanded emotion, a feeling of appreciation, gratitude, joy, or bliss. Now breathe in slowly, slowing down your breath in for 5 seconds, and then out for 6 seconds. Keep that breath. You're tuning to that frequency. Your signal is enough. You're already in possession of it. This signal holds everything that the pendulums try to tell you that you lack. From this place, from this field that you're generating right now in your body, in your heart, in the electromagnetic space extending several feet beyond your skin, let your awareness turn toward what you are building. Not chasing, building. The life, the relationships, the creative work, the abundance, not as things you need, but as frequencies that exist in the space of variations, waiting for a signal coherent enough to call them into form. You are that signal. You have always been that signal. The Pendulum War ends not with a battle. It ends with this, with you here generating a field that the pendulum's broadcast simply cannot penetrate, because the pendulum has never had access to your coherent heart. It has only ever had access to your incoherent one. And you just change that setting. The Pendulum War is the oldest conflict in human history, long before there were networks to broadcast it at scale, long before social media and 24-hour news cycles and the architecture of algorithmic engagement designed to monetize incoherence, long before any of the modern delivery mechanisms, the pendulum was present. In every tribal conflict, every manufactured scarcity, every war fought in the name of an abstraction that needed human bodies to sustain it. What is new is not the pendulum. What is new is us. The data from the Global Consciousness Project, the HeartMath Institute, the Anomalous Schumann events, the Morphogenetic field research, all of it points toward the same shift. Human beings are becoming collectively more aware of the broadcast, more capable of distinguishing between external frequency and internal signal, more coherent, more frequently in many ways that were historically rare, and are now becoming available to ordinary people through ordinary practice. The convergence that Looking Glass showed, the shift that every wisdom tradition predicted, the awakening that every pendulum in history has worked to prevent. It's not happening somewhere else to someone more enlightened. It's happening in the space between the broadcast and your response to it. It is happening in the half second of choice, in the coherent heart of a single person sitting quietly feeling something real. It's happening now, in you. You can find all episodes of The Reality Revolution at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.